What was your goal when you were in nutritional science? Did you plan to go into food safety?
Totally not planned. I took on that other job that I was telling you about, and it was shift work, so I was not able to go to school. And after a couple of years, I said, well, this is not going anywhere, so I better come up with plan B.
What would be the best skills to highlight coming into, let's say, a QC role or QA role?
Critical thinking, analytical thinking, root cause analysis is another really, really good, important concept to be aware of. Don't just say yes because I'm director or you might be manager. Please challenge me. If you think that what I'm saying is incorrect, you need to speak up. Currently, I work for Sofina Foods, which is a major meat processing company in Canada. I'm in a position of senior director, programs and compliance. And what that means is I look after our internal audit program. I look after corporate programs such as SOPs, um, key performance indicators or metrics, continuous improvement, a little bit of that as well. So it's a quite an interesting role, and it's quite.
Let's talk about as you've just said again that you work as a director. So to me, when you get to more of a senior management role, that sounds like it's a leadership more than going and doing, like you said, going in and making SOPs. So how much would you say your role is more so managing people, like, or leading more that leadership side versus more like the hands-on technical one-on-one type skills?
Yeah, you're definitely right, Veronica. I'd say the more you progress in your career, it becomes a little bit less hands-on, which I sometimes miss, and it becomes more about leadership and making sure that you have strong team working with you. Yes, technical skills are important, and you need to be master of those. But I'm also finding, sometimes as your leadership role expands, you're not always a subject matter expert anymore. Like internal audit is a great example. It's something that I took on at Sofina, but I don't have, a lot of experience in internal auditing myself. So I'm relying on team members on my team who are experts in this. And some of them have been doing internal audits for 20 plus years. So as you progress with your career, you're finding yourself in all of these situations where you're not necessarily the subject matter expert. And that's where building a strong team and making sure that your team remains motivated and high performing, it becomes even more critical. So 100%, the leadership skills become more and more important as you progress.
I think that's really interesting how you mentioned about relying on your team because I think as young people, we think about leaders, professors, like they're the all-knowing, they know everything when it comes to everything single portion of the role. So to hear you speak about how you rely on your team members, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's something I also stress with my team. So especially when you are, and again, I can speak from recent experience, when you're in a new position and you're, let's say, in a director role, people assume that you know everything better than them. And I constantly remind my team, please challenge me. Don't just say yes because I'm director or you might be manager. Please challenge me. If you think that what I'm saying is incorrect, you need to speak up. Don't accept just the fact that Marin said it and that's the only way to do it. When you look across the team, we have a lot of different experiences, and in some cases, my experience is not the most relevant one for the situation. So it's important to emphasize with your team that, yeah, please challenge if you believe there's a better way of doing this, or if you think that I'm plain wrong in what I'm saying.
So, but then when you work in the team, right? So you just always have a different thought by every individual people. So how do you put like a final thought like this is the right when there is no conflict between thoughts? How do you manage those situations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, there's probably not a single answer to that. I would say it depends. So if the decision is very important and very critical. So let's say you are making a decision regarding regulatory compliance or safety of the product. That is, not a situation to where you want to reach a consensus or, compromise. In those situations, you don't compromise. But if we're talking about something like, let's say we're writing an SOP, a brand new SOP, and there's 5 different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Then, it's more of a situation to say, okay, let's put our heads together, let's collaborate on this, and let's come to a consensus what this SOP should look like, knowing that, hey, if that SOP is a little bit off, hey, we can change it in a month or in a year when we review it. So it really depends on the criticality of the
Mm,
situation. Another factor is your team competency. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, you knowing your team, are you confident that they have the right knowledge? And if you know that they do, then yes, you can rely on them. But if your team doesn't have the competency that you need in that situation, then you need to go beyond, either rely on your
mm,
own or go beyond your team to get the competency that you need, especially if the decision is a very critical one.
mm. It's true.
And one other thing on to lead on top of that is that I was thinking about you said challenge, to challenge you if there was something you might not agree on. How would someone go about doing that? Because that could be really scary. I can imagine, speaking up to your superior, but do you have any suggestions about how if someone was feeling that this isn't the right thing to do, how they would present their ideas?
I think it does start with the leader and giving that express permission to disagree with you. It's also your demeanor or the way you're conveying the messages. So, like I said, giving them that express permission as you are getting to know them, but also during the conversations, just saying, what does everybody else think about this? Is this the right decision? Is this the right way of doing it? So, making sure that people hear it loud and clear. My voice matters, and I'm being asked to put forward my decision, to put forward my thought or my rationale on how to do this. So it's constant encouragement to contribute to the conversation.
Okay, and I guess as well, like build upon your coworkers as well. Like if you're not quite ready to speak to your superior, which again, I know that you just mentioned about it being, the leader should encourage the environment, but I guess speaking with your coworkers would also be a good start as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's also an element of the corporate culture, and I've been fortunate enough to work for companies that encourage that healthy debate and discussion and joint decision making. Yeah, so I think there's also that element of just corporate culture uh, as well.
Okay. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how you got to the position that you are currently, because a lot of people that's working up the ladder, they want to know how you actually got there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the key steps that led you to where you are currently?
That's a good question. Certainly, as an overarching statement, there was certainly no grand master plan. Hey, I want to be there in 25 years, and that's exactly how it worked out. It was just a series of events, starting with my undergraduate degree that was actually nutritional sciences, and I
Okay.
found myself not being able to find a job right out of university. So I spent 2 years being in a completely different industry. And then I went back to school. I did a degree. I completed a degree in food safety at the University of Guelph, and that landed me my first role in the food industry. And then it took a couple of moves from that first job. I went to Maple Leaf Foods, and that was a great learning experience over 7 years in a bunch of different roles between QA, Six Sigma, QA at the corporate level, but also QA at the plant level. Then I made a slightly lateral move into food service, and again, it was a food safety slash health and safety role for about 6 years, and then after that, I came to Sofina. So it's really, I would say, no secret sauce. It's more of a how things unraveled, but I think that what was key to all of that is learning from every role, including the one that was totally unrelated to food safety or food manufacturing. It was actually a customer service role. But in that role, I learned how to listen to people and how to, especially how to face someone who might be a little bit upset or annoyed, how to calm people down. So you might say, hey, that has nothing to do with food safety, but in your everyday job, you might come across people who are a little annoyed or a little upset or a little bit off. So how do you talk to those people? And that every successive role taught me something else. My first job, probably greatest learning experience, was communications. How to, write a really, how to take a piece of research and communicate that in a language that somebody who doesn't have a science background can understand. And that serves me really well even to today when you're to in this role where you're trying to take a piece of regulation, let's say, and make it applicable to a plant or explain it to somebody else who doesn't know the details, the nuts and bolts of those regulations. So anyway, coming back, the short answer is taking all of those experiences that you have in each role and then building on top of that and applying it in your successive jobs.
What was your goal when you were in nutritional science? Did you plan to go into food safety?
Nope, nope.
Okay.
I wanted to become a dietitian. Well,
Okay.
actually, I wanted to initially the plan was to go into dentistry, and then I changed that plan. I wanted to become a dietitian, and the program was not accredited at the time, so it I had to take another 5 or 6 courses to be eligible for that for an internship. In the meantime, I took on that other job that I was telling you about, and it was shift work, so I was not able to go to school. And after a couple of years, I said, well, this is not going anywhere, so I better come up with plan B. And that's how I ended up at the University of Guelph in a food safety program. So totally not planned.
While getting your first job, like what type of skills and like what type of learning you have like with you, like while going for the first interview? What you have?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And frankly, it was for the first couple of years, it was of great concern to me because you're applying for a job and you finally land that interview and you know that you have basically zero experience. So
Yeah.
how do you convince that interviewer that you're the right candidate for the job, right?
Mm.
So I'd say, the key there is to look at your transferable skills. So, what have you learned either during your education, or maybe you had jobs over the summer, maybe you had a year where you worked in a certain industry, maybe it was a restaurant or some sort of a service sector. What kind of transferable skills do you have that could be used during that interviewing process? So from a technical standpoint, you have your educational background, and then your employer is going to be looking for all sorts of other soft skills. It could be communication skills, it could be, I don't know, negotiation skills. So how can you how and the key is always to give the examples, right? So what kind of examples would you have to showcase that you have good communication skills or good negotiation skills, and trying to use examples from your previous experience, either in the workforce, or maybe you had a project in school and you had to, manage a group of um, peers who were not pulling their weight. So what kind of a difficult conversation did you have with them to make sure that, they're doing part of their task for a project? So try to come up with all of these situations and transferable skills that translate to the job posting or the job that you're applying for and being interviewed for.
Do you have any examples specifically to food safety? I would imagine that a lot of individuals, they might just be coming out with a food safety degree. And what would be the best skills to highlight coming into, let's say, a QC role or QA role? Because those are generally the first stepping stones for food safety.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would say the key skills there would be critical thinking or analytical thinking. Are you able to take a problem and then dissect it and figure out how to fix that problem, right? So critical thinking, analytical thinking, root cause analysis is another really good important concept to be aware of. The other one is communication skills. So are you able to articulate your ideas? So now you've taken that problem, you've come up with, a 3-step plan on how to fix that problem. Are you able to communicate your plan to others so they can understand it in an easy fashion? And I would say another quality or characteristics, and I don't know if this is necessarily learned or acquired over time, but being a good team player. So no matter where you end up working, you're going to be part of a bigger team. So how do you demonstrate to your team that you're somebody they can rely on? So, if you're working in a manufacturing environment, how do you signal, how do you demonstrate to others around you that if there's an issue, they can come to you? And you're going to be able to help them, whether it's from the technical standpoint or just plain elbow grease. You're willing to dig in and help and do the hard work to fix an issue. So I would say those are probably the three key characteristics or skills if you're just starting out in the food industry, whether it's manufacturing or I would say that probably applies in a lot of other industries, not just food.
I admit those are it's a little comforting to hear that because I feel as though you can pick up a lot of those skills in maybe those summer jobs like you mentioned, like even doing working at an amusement park. You start to learn how to speak with others, be as a team member. It seems like they're transferable and it's a little bit more accessible of ability for someone to do than someone might realize.
100%. So 100%, I'll give you again that example of the customer service job that I held. Communication skills, 100%. You're dealing with angry passengers who were just left stranded somewhere in the middle of nowhere. You're
Ooh,
trying to calm them down. Two, you're trying to figure out how you're going to get them from the point where they are stranded to their hotel. So that's your analytical problem solving skills, right? So, and you're a team player because you're part of a bigger customer service team. So, all three fully applicable. And to your point, I think many other summer jobs or part-time gigs would fit all three check boxes.
In my class as well, like everyone has like different background. Like someone has pharma, someone has organic chemistry, someone has like biochemistry. Like having a different background and going in the food industry, like how it's like sometimes it's not easy way. So how we are like try to get the job in food industry.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. So I was thinking about this a couple of days ago. So if I think about people I know who are in the food industry in a QA slash food safety job, sure, a lot of them have a science background, whether it's microbiology or maybe biology. But I also know people who have background in engineering. So I know somebody who's a chemical engineer, for example, who got into food safety. I know somebody who used to be a lawyer and he's in food safety. So, it's there's
wow.
definitely ways to acquire those skills as you go. You certainly have an advantage if you have the technical training in quality assurance, but some people somehow find their way into the food safety world through other means, just learning on the job. Maybe they start off in production and there's an opening for a QA technician. They accept the role. They already know the plant. They know the processes and the products. They have a bit of an aptitude to learn, and they're a quick learner. And before you know it, they're in a QA position, and that's where they end up working for a long time.
Let's take the conversation back to your food job and talking about we this was great advice in terms of students learning about how to go into it, but I want to kind of focus more on your current role. And we spoke about that communication and that teamwork. And one of the things that I've been known to hear in the food industry is that there's a little bit of a butting of heads, so to say. I don't like to put it that way between production and food safety because with production of course they care about food safety, but their numbers are in a different area. So, how do you handle situations where there might be a little bit of conflict between the two
Yeah, yeah,
sections, so quote unquote?
yeah. No, you're 100% right. So, and again, this is my third food company, and it's always you're finding that scenario everywhere, and I don't think it comes from um, lack of understanding or anything nefarious going on. It's literally people have different lenses and different priorities, and that's why we have different functions. So we have production, we have, quality assurance, we have HR, we have all sorts of different functions who are there, but a slightly different lens. and as a team, you're trying to come to the best solution and conclusion. I think for QA, when it comes to reconciling those differences between, let's say, operations or production and QA, I think it's really important. Again, we're going back to the communication skills, communicating where you're coming from. And typically you're coming from either perspective of regulatory compliance or internal standard or maybe third-party standards. Sometimes it's, I would say, common sense or knowledge or something you acquired during training. Could be risk assessment or something like that. It's important to be able to communicate your ideas. It's also important to be fact-based. So if we are talking about, I don't know, I'm going to come up with an example. We're talking about, let's say, an ingredient that's been temperature abused. Okay, well, there's objective ways to assess whether that ingredient is still safe to use or not. And do we have the data? If we have the data, let's look at what the data is telling us. So you're trying to be as fact-based and objective as you can, and also data-driven. So what is the data telling us? Because at the end of the day, if you can explain your thoughts in a clear format, and you're able to back your thoughts with data and science, people are more likely to listen to you.
Okay. Huh. I mean, that does make sense that you would want to use data, but I do find that I don't know, maybe I have the wrong impression, but I feel like sometimes people the data isn't enough for them. Like, is that ever a situation?
I mean, you can always poke holes at the data. Um, you know, I I think even bigger challenge sometimes is that you don't have the data that you would love to
Mhm.
have. And especially if you have
Okay.
that, science background, you're looking for perfection, not necessarily perfection, but you're looking for that perfect set of data. And in the real world, sometimes you don't have access to all the data that you would like to have. And at the end of the day, it's what's frequently talked about in the food safety industry or jobs is the risk assessment. How much do we know? How much information is missing? What is it that we know? And then based on that, what kind of a conclusion can we draw? And what is the residual risk? If we feel that and believe me, the you know the when you look at that residual risk, it's not a number. Sometimes you're looking at, you know, the data and evidence. It could be data, it could be statements, it could be just, bits and pieces of information that you piece together during the investigation. At the end of the day, um, you have to make a determination, is the product safe or not? And of course, in QA, you're kind of taking the precautionary principle. You want to be very, very safe before you release a product or you make a decision. And you have to compensate for lack of perfect data. So you have to acknowledge what's not known and what the risks are. Um, if certain scenarios play out. I hope this makes sense. So it's really decision making with imperfect data. It gets better over time as you become more experienced at it, and that's also a really really great situation where you don't want to be the only person providing the input. You want to get inputs from other people who've been maybe in similar situations or same situations in the past. That's where the group is going to come to a better conclusion than a single person who thinks that they know everything.
No, absolutely, it does make sense to me. As you were speaking about it, I'm just thinking about all the different data points that you could be grabbing, and I'm just thinking about I guess I'm already jumping to the next question, which is just we keep saying data, but, like, what kinda data and technology are we actually talking about that might be guiding these decisions?
Yeah, in the food safety world, you're looking at, for example, temperature records. If we're talking about CCPs, whether it's, cooling records or cooking CCP. Um, in some cases, it could be a combination of time and temperature. When it comes to risk assessment, you could get also into statements from employees, other employees, QA technicians, or somebody who was on the floor when the incident occurred. It really varies. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Veronica.
Yeah, I guess I might be even leading the question because I'm trying to veer the conversation to more so talk about we one of the things that come up, I don't want to start talking about the whole AI type thing, but one thing that's come up, and I'm not trying to dive into that, is just about that critical thinking piece and how you actually interpret data. And as a QA, like how, uh, I guess I'm just trying to, yeah, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
where I'm going with this.
No, here, maybe I can help out a little bit. So, I mean, there's a couple of, well, there's a range of situations where you can use data. Data can be used in a for a particular incident to do a risk assessment. You can also look at data from the perspective of long-term trends. So if you think about environmental monitoring or your supplier complaints. So yes, you may have, a supplier complaint today and maybe another in a couple of weeks. But when you look at the longer term, you're looking at 1 year worth of data, you might say, oh, wait a second, 10% of all our supplier complaints are coming from a single supplier. So even though it didn't jump out at you, when you look at the long-term trends, you might pick up on certain things. And you might say, hey, we actually need to go and talk to the supplier because they are causing a lot of issues. So um, it I guess the point I'm trying to make, there's different situations where you can use the data. One is very obvious. We just had an incident and we need to figure out what to do. Let's look at the data that we're already collecting. The data is there for exactly this purpose, but you can also use data that you're collecting for, less urgent and less obvious um, situations, such as, monitoring your suppliers and their performance.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it because we think about data and we'd love to have it where it just pops up on the screen. You should be concerned about this X, Y, and Z. But I feel like in food safety, you might not you're not always going to have a program that just identifies this is a problem. Like you have to come in and be
Uh,
able to
yeah,
identify it. And that's kind of where I was trying to get at was just being a good food safety professional. It feels like you have to have a bit of pattern recognition as well to be able to identify this is a concern long term.
no, 100%. And I mean, it all starts with, I talked earlier about metrics and KPIs. What are your KPIs? What do you need to keep an eye on? Thinking about the entire process, if you start with your suppliers, that's something you need to keep an eye on. So what's the frequency? What is the number of complaints or incidents we're getting from our suppliers? And then at the back end, you can also look at it from the perspective of consumer or customer complaints. For finished product, what kind of trends do we have for a particular product category or a certain SKU? So you have to intentionally look for those. You have to have good quality, reliable data, and then you have to look for patterns and trends. And there's no, miracle button that you just push and everything happens magically. So you have to be very intentional in what you're collecting, how you're collecting it, making sure that it's clean data, and then looking for those patterns and trends in your data in order to follow up.
During your job, there is like always in the authority who is changing the regulations, like
Mhm.
HACCP and everything, which you
Mhm.
handle in your job. But at the same
Mhm.
time, FDA and other food regulations authority who is changing the regulations. So how do you handle the situation when regulation is changing at the same time you have to maintain your company's regulation as well, and your production line is going on. So how you manage those situation?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. Yes. So for when it comes to regulatory changes, they're never sudden. So there's always, bit of a lead time, consultation period, and the industry, even once the regulations are finalized, they're rarely going to affect immediately. So you do have time to react and adjust. At the end of the day, you have to abide by the regulations and you have to follow that, but there's always time to change your internal practices to match those regulations. So I wouldn't say that that is a very common challenge or problem. There's plenty of time to for industry to adjust to regulatory changes. And also when it comes to the export markets, maybe I can pick up on that as well. So um, any food company exporting also monitors regulatory changes in their export markets, and it's a very similar situation. So you know well ahead of time that processes or regulations are changing. You have to stay on top of them, but you also have the time to react to that.
I understand. Because in our class, like professor always teaches about different type of regulation where you can look at it. And they mentioned that you have to keep eye on always on the what type of regulation are changing because sometimes if you don't keep an eye on the regulations that might cause an issue in your industry as well. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why I asked this
Yeah.
question.
And you're raising, so you are reminding me of something that can happen pretty suddenly. So when it comes to, I'm gonna go back to meat industry again. Um, you could run into a situation where a certain country is, for example, the meat product from a certain country is banned by your export market.
Mm,
So you're exporting to country X, and that country X does not accept a certain meat from country Y anymore. So if you're importing country Y's product as an input in your process, all of a sudden your final product that you're trying to export to country X is not eligible for export anymore. So that's a situation where you really need to keep an eye on changing regulations. So you're right, that one can be pretty sudden. So they can make a decision on antibiotics or something like that, and that can be fairly quick. So yeah, 100%. So you have to keep an eye on regulations, especially as it pertains to export markets.
Well, speaking about regulations and movement of the industry, let's talk about one thing that I know that you're really passionate about is just improvement in waste elimination for your processes. That's something that really is something that you strive for. So, how do you train? It's very easy to get caught up in your day to day that you just want to get your tests done, make sure there's so much going on in production. It's hard to actually go and improve, I could imagine, because you're just trying to keep up with the day to day, keep up with those KPIs, those markets, but actually like taking it to the next step can be a little bit of a challenge. So like how do you go about trying to make improvements within your department, within your team and, take it to the next level rather than just maintaining the status quo?
You're 100% right. So it can be challenging finding time for continuous improvement. Um, and I think that the key to that is to coach, to show your team members what's possible. So if you're seeing a recurring issue, one question that you might ask is, well, why are we seeing? And obviously, in the ideal world, if we're doing proper root cause analysis, we should eliminate all issues that we have. But in reality, that doesn't happen. But you can start by asking a simple question, which is, okay, we've seen this repeat issue 5 times over the last 3 months. How can we get out of that loop? How do we make sure we do a better root cause analysis, and how do we find a sustainable solution? And sometimes you have to walk the person through that process. Sometimes you have to show them some of the tools they can use to do it, whether it's fishbone analysis or a simple 5 why analysis, and just teaching them how to apply some of those tools to solve those issues. It's also carving out the time for it. So if you're dealing with a team member who's swamped, how do you make sure that they get some additional bandwidth to fix some of those issues? Or if you're dealing, even as simple example is if you're dealing with um, document control that's done in a manual fashion, well, maybe there's some tools out there that can save us 30, 40, 50% of the time if we start using those tools. It's, coaching people, encouraging people to look for improvement opportunities, helping them out, guiding them through the process. Again, I don't think, Veronica, I have the silver bullet to that, but sometimes it can be as simple as just explaining what the opportunities are and what the tools are and getting people to actually try them out.
Sounds like almost just having a conversation, like actually just taking the time and just sitting down and just speaking about things.
Yeah, 100%. So let's say you're sitting across from a team member who says, I'm absolutely swamped. I have so many tasks. I'm not able to get it done in my allotted hours. Okay, the follow-up could be, okay, let's sit down and let's write down all the tasks that you have, right? So you create the list, and then the next question is, okay, let's figure out, how much time you spend on each of these tasks. And then you look at, kind of like 80-20 rule. Maybe 3 or 4 tasks are the majority or 80% of that person's time. Okay, so we have those four tasks that are bulk of your time. Let's look at each one of them and see if we can make them more efficient, right? Maybe you've taken on something that you shouldn't even own and should sit with another department, or maybe you are doing it in a very manual way, and maybe we can get it done through SharePoint or Power BI or Power Query, or some sort of a tool that that person wasn't aware of. So as long as you're methodical about it and you have that conversation in a structured way, I think you can unlock some, you can free up some time and be more efficient.
But during training the person, uh, always like a different type of person there. Like some are fast learners, some are slow learner. So how do you manage those situations to teach them very efficiently?
I mean, I would probably start by asking, if you're dealing with somebody who you perceive to be a slow learner, what what makes them learn in a slow way? I would start with myself. So am I maybe not teaching them the right way? Because there are different learning styles, right? So
Sure.
I would always start internally. So are we providing information to that person in the correct way? Maybe they're a visual learner, or maybe they just want to go on the floor and try things out, and that's the way they learn. Um, that's one. The other one is, at the end of the day, you also want to make sure that you're assigning the tasks to the appropriate people. So maybe somebody who's a quick learner and they've learned the task, maybe you can assign them something that's a little bit more critical
Mm.
or time sensitive. Maybe a slow learner is going to be more comfortable with a less critical task or something that where they can take the luxury of taking a month to learn that task. So trying to match up the task to the ability of that individual to learn the task. It's a great question. Again, no silver bullet, but those would be some guidelines that I would kind of apply and try to use.
Like, what is your favorite part about the job?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say probably the fact that the job is varied. So every single day is a little different than the previous one. And in the process, I enjoy learning. So in the process of having to, tackle or deal with something that's a little different, you're inevitably learning and growing. So um, that's probably, and also in the process of problem solving and trying to figure out how to do something, you're researching, you're thinking things through, you are um, learning. So I would to sum it up, I think it's the varied nature of the job and what I see on a day-to-day basis, and the fact that I'm able to learn something new pretty much every single day.
I love that. That is I mean, I think that's what a lot of people look for. I think that we think about maybe research and development as being that only aspect that you can really learn about new things every day, but, in a role like yours, it sounds like as you keep moving on, there's always just something new to learn, and that's a great thing to know because we don't want our jobs to be boring.
Nope, that's yeah, it's definitely not boring. That's for sure.
And I wanted to shift the conversation because we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation, and I would be like I have to ask about the OFPA because that's something that you're very obviously involved in. So, tell us for those who aren't familiar, what is the OFPA?
Yeah, so OFPA, or Ontario Food Protection Association, that's the full name, is an affiliate of the International Association for Food Protection. And it's basically an organization that promotes learning, information sharing, and networking among food safety professionals. For OFPA, obviously, it's Ontario specific. We do have members beyond Ontario, but obviously we are focused on supporting food safety professionals in our province. And when I say food safety professionals, I mean in a broad sense, it's students, recent graduates, current professionals. We also have memberships for, corporate memberships, and it's all about, information sharing, providing opportunities for networking. We do have our annual conference coming up on September 30th and October 1st this year. So that's an example of where we're going to have an amazing array of speakers, networking opportunities. We're going to have some exhibitors there as well who are going to be there to showcase their offerings and their services. So again, it's all about information sharing and making sure that food safety professionals in our province have access to some amazing information and networking opportunities.
I didn't know actually that it was I thought OFPA was just its own standalone, organization. I didn't actually realize that it was part of, like, a greater international one.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So that's I'm probably not gonna get the numbers right, but I think the IFP, or the International Association for Food Protection, has over 50 affiliate associations across the globe. So Canada, North America, South America, Europe, Asia, all
Wow,
over the world,
that's a
literally
lot.
all over the world. Yeah.
Wow, and when it comes to opportunities for students and early career professionals, I would imagine that there are some resources that are available.
Hmm. No, 100%. So as a matter of fact, some of our members of the board, so we currently have 13 people on the board. Um, we have some student members who joined the board and have been there for years. We also have volunteering opportunities. So we have a very specific committee that seeks to recruit and give meaningful tasks and assignments to student volunteers. So it could be creating videos or posts for social media, developing, short resources, volunteering at the annual conference that's coming up September 30th, October 1st. Um, even we have a membership category that's tailored to students. Currently, it's $20 per year, and through that you have reduced access to reduced prices for the annual conference. You have access to webinars, including webinar recordings from previous years. We're also working on some cross promotions or collaborations with other organizations to give you access to discounts to training or discounts to membership to other organizations. So there's a whole array of benefits, and I would encourage everybody to visit the OFPA website and take a look at what the membership has to offer to students, but also, professionals.
Amazing. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes because I think that would be if anyone's in Ontario, that would be such a valid or really great opportunity to gain not only, we talked about leadership experience, you maybe get the potential to go on the board, but also work on those communication skills, be on a team. Like those are perfect things to add
Exactly.
to the resume.
Exactly. And maybe I'm just going to jump in with one little fact that I should have mentioned. So OFPA is a not-for-profit organization, and the board is comprised entirely of volunteers. So we're not compensated for any of the work. And all the revenue from the AGM and from our sponsorships are reinvested back into events and offerings. And when you look at, I would encourage anyone to take a look at our previous agenda and speakers we were able to attract, and we're going to have an agenda for this year out very soon. We have really, really high profile speakers at a fraction of the cost that you would see, at other comparable conferences. So honestly, I can say I'm very proud of what we're able to pull off with the resources that we have.
I will definitely join this one with me. I can also join the volunteering and everything. It's like a different approach.
So the OFPA membership provides you access to the OFPA resources and
Mm.
benefits. If you were to join the International Association for Food Protection, they also, obviously, bigger organization, bigger in scope. They also ask you if you want to join your provincial affiliate. So if you were to go on the IFP website and you were to become a member, there will be a little checkbox to say, hey, would you also like to become a member of the Ontario Food Protection Association? And then the membership fee is adjusted accordingly. But the offerings it's for all intents and purposes, it's two separate organizations. So you have to be member of each to get benefits of the of that organization, if that makes sense.
Mm. And if I want to do a volunteering at OFPA conference, which is coming next, um, should I have to be a member of the OFPA or is it not?
It definitely makes a lot of sense to become a member because, and again, we haven't published the costs or sorry the rates for the conference, but when you look at the discount that you get for to the conference if you're a member, it definitely makes sense to become a member and then sign up for the AGM or the conference.
And I will definitely join the membership for sure.
Well, we've talked about a lot of different things today, Marin. We've talked about what your food job is. We've talked about how you got there, about leadership qualities, communication. There's been a lot of things that have been spoken about today, and it's been great. So I just want to kind of put it all together with one last question is just advice because we love hearing about advice. So for students who are dreaming about your job, maybe you weren't dreaming of your job back in your undergraduate, but those that might be right now, what would be your piece of advice that they should start doing right now?
A good one. That's a good one. So that's definitely something would have loved to know, loved to have known 5 years ago. So I would say advice number one is network. Try to network as much as you can. And this is not for the purpose of, approaching somebody and saying, hey, do you have a job for me? Because the answer is probably going to be no. What are the odds, right? It's more along the lines of getting to know as many people as you can. And a helpful angle is to come from is to say, hey, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your company, or I'd love to learn a little bit more about your job, or what what you know what does success look like at your company? What kind of qualities or knowledge should I bring to the table if I wanted to apply for a job at your company down the road? And people love talking about their jobs and their companies and how they got there, you know so that gives you a bit of a foot in the door to truly learn about what it takes to be successful in that at that company or in that role. But also keep in mind, as you build that network, now you have all of these people who know you, who know a little bit about you, and you left a positive impression on them as they met you. So when that next job pops up, the job opening pops up, that person might actually think of you and say, hey, there's this job posting, maybe you should apply for it. Or you might reach out to that person and say, hey, I just heard that your company is recruiting. Do you have any tips? So network, network, network. So that gives you, more exposure. You will learn more. You will have more contacts in the industry. And, you know, that's not the only thing that's going to land you a job, but it might give you an interview, right? And a chance and a fair shot at that position. The other advice I would say is try to develop skills that are complementary. So yes, we have our food safety technical knowledge. We talked about communication skills and but things like analytics. Do you know how to take a data set and analyze it? Do you know how to work with Excel to do that? Do you maybe know how to work with Minitab in order to do it? And go even beyond that. Are you comfortable with document management solutions such as SharePoint, right? So try to think about all of these things that are kind of important in the food safety world, and try to get those skills beforehand. It could give you a bit of an advantage. Everything else equal, that could give you a bit of an advantage in a job interview. And maybe the last one is, and I think we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, coming fresh out of school, you don't have that experience, but don't worry about it. So don't, I'll give you again an example. That first job in the food industry that I applied for, I ended up getting the job. I would say I had maybe 3/4 of the qualifications that were listed there. So if you have some qualification gaps, apply. What's the worst thing that can happen? You don't hear from the company. Best thing that can happen is you actually get the job, right? So don't overanalyze your lack of skill, because you have transferable skills, and if your background is not the perfect match with the job description, still apply. You never know.
Amazing, and I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you so much, Marin, for taking Thank you so much, Marin, for taking time to come on the show, talk about what you do, how you got there. I think that this conversation is gonna be so valuable to those that are listening, and we appreciate your time here today.